Hey, deserving listeners. So we have a bunch of short questions that you submitted to us that you wanted us to talk about. I thought I would do that with Humberto and Michael Drane here. So let's get into that. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and I make sundials that work in the dark.
My name is Michael Drane. I am a therapist and host of the Unpopular Culture podcast.
So there's a number of little things that people wanted us to talk about. I'll start with one thing that I know neither of, because you haven't seen the documentary, The Family I Had, right?
No.
So I'll just briefly talk about it. People wanted me to talk about it. It's a documentary. It's on Amazon Prime. It's a documentary about a family, 3 generations, and the boy, he kills his younger sister in this very random act of murder that seemingly came out of nowhere.
Was it an accident? Or?
No, it was on purpose, and he's currently in prison. And it's like, it was like, I don't know, 10 years ago that he did it.
How old was he?
He was, I think, 13, and his sister was like 5, I think.
Oh my God.
And it was brutal, too. It was like... So the documentary focuses on the mom primarily, because she only had 2 kids, and then she has now a new kid who's 1 or 2 years old, and they also focus on the mom's mom, because the mom's mom, the grandma of the kid who died and the kid who killed someone, seemingly has some psychopathic traits as well. Hard to know. There's also this implication like the grandma might have murdered her husband like 40 years ago or something. So it's an interesting documentary. It's called The Family I Had. And what I will say is that if you've seen it, it's a good, the kid, the boy is a good example of what we would call a sadistic psychopath.
By the way, this is not a reenactment thing. It's a documentary.
Yeah. And they interview the kid in prison.
Okay. Oh boy.
And, because the kid grew up in the time of video cameras, they have all this footage of the boy and as a young person, and then the boy playing with his younger sister and all that kind of stuff.
So sorry, this is a real story?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, documentary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you see it when they show those videos of them playing and stuff? Can you notice anything behaviorally?
Right. So I'll just go through the things that point us to this is a good depiction of an extreme psychopath, meaning that he lacks empathy and remorse, and he's also sadistic in that he likes to target other people with aggression and he likes to harm other people. So first off, we can see potentially a genetic disposition. There's no way to measure that, but you have a grandma who might also have psychopathy passed down through the generations. There seems to be some link genetically to this. It's obviously not a slam dunk. If you have a psychopathic parent, it's not like you're automatically a psychopath.
Right.
It's just
much higher though. If there were environmental factors, you would look for a history of trauma. The kid would be abused, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So he was mistreated in early childhood. They kind of glossed over it because it was focused on the mom, and the mom would be responsible for a lot of that. But the mom, when the boy was a young child, the mom had a lot of problems with alcohol and drugs and everything, and they kind of glossed over that.
What about the father?
The father had issues too, and he might have actually even died at some point.
Also mysteriously died?
No, not mysteriously. Like for some,
right.
I can't remember. So you have genetic disposition, you have the mistreatment of childhood, neglect, this kind of thing, which for some kids, essentially, to put a fine point on it, the idea goes is that in a psychoanalytic sense is that you are being treated badly, and so you have a choice. You can either be a victim to that and just be like, I'm a victim, I'm sad, I'm demoralized, and you enter this sort of, it's your fate to be abused. The other option, and there's a few others, but one of the options that you have is you can identify with the problem, with the abuser, and you could say, well, I'm just as powerful as them, and I'm going to internalize that power because I like that power. I like that power to eliminate other people's happiness,
I see.
And so you start identifying in that way. You could almost say through modeling, but also it's just a way to cope. When you feel powerless, it feels good to be powerful. And so when his younger sister is born into the family, he's already feeling pretty bad about life. He's already traumatized and has attachment issues. And now he looks at his younger sister and he's like, you're taking away attention from me.
So there's like a reactive attachment sort of thing.
And so he starts to be aggressive towards and there's video of the mom, with filming the two kids, and the older boy is kind of starting to be a little rough with the 18-month-old younger sister. And the mom's like, take it easy, play nice, and he's significantly older. He's not like 3 years old. He's like 8 or 9 at the time, And so you see this pattern of aggressiveness and harming other people. Then we see that he starts drawing a lot of drawings of guns and knives, and he's really into violence. And it's concerning to the family. So we're starting to build a pattern here, which is very common for this progression of personality.
For sure.
Then he murders his younger sister for no reason. Like there was no precipitating event. He just probably had an urge to do it for a long time.
He sounds kind of reactive attachment-y, though. Like, could he have perceived some kind of slight against mom giving the sister more attention, or maybe a psychotic quality? Was there anything like that?
No, he didn't. Through the rest of his life, didn't exhibit any psychosis. Okay, but yes, the language reactive attachment, is not the language I would use. I would just use that massive attachment problem. And his defense against that was like to blame his younger sister for his problems, right? And that built and built and built in him. And again, with the disposition for lack of empathy and all that kind of stuff.
Perfect storm.
He murders her. Yeah. And the interesting thing is, as soon as he does it, he calls the cops and says, I did it. Like there was no investigation. Like within minutes, he calls 911 and he's like, I killed, and because, according to his account, he, in that moment, actually felt scared that she was going to die. And he was pretty sure she was dead because he really went to town on her. But he had this thought like, well, maybe if the ambulance comes, they can save her because I don't actually want her to die. So it's just interesting how...
Oh, my God.
And then he obviously goes to prison and blah, blah, blah. So this is a good example of a extreme case of sadistic psychopathy, personality problem that comes from a disposition, comes from mistreatment, and shows how dysfunctional these people are. Because in the movies, we have, sadistic psychopaths depicted as these evil geniuses. Yeah. Or people have this narrative now because of popular discourse that psychopaths are like CEOs and stuff. And certainly they can be. Certainly some CEOs can have those qualities. And sometimes psychopathy can help you rise in the ranks because you don't have a problem like stepping on other people or manipulating things.
Also keeping in mind that psychopathy exists on the spectrum.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So you're lower on the spectrum. But when you have full-blown psychopaths, you have massive dysfunction. He says, right after I did it, I regretted it. And I've regretted it ever since. Right. If I could take it, I wish she was alive, And he's even kind of like, I kind of wish maybe I would be dead or something, Yeah. So
of course, keeping in mind, if he is on the psychopathy spectrum, he might be saying that playing to the camera that's interviewing him.
Could be
saying that without ever having seen this, but
totally, it's impossible to know. But
a combination of both.
Right? Sure.
I think he. From his, I think he's like 20 or 21 now, maybe 24. His interviews, he comes across as someone who has problems. Like you can kind of tell that he has issues. You could tell that he's not like deeply remorseful the way that a non-psychopath would be, but you can also tell like he regrets it. Like, and he's not like he. Plus, like I said, as soon as he did it, he called 911.
But I've seen somebody kill somebody, call 911, and they did it because they saw that as the next logical course of action, or even out of a matter of curiosity about what or a desire for the attention for what they had done to befall on them.
Maybe, but when he calls 911, it seems clear to me that my point is that it's a common narrative. That it's like,
this isn't some like
the gears are turning. He was looking at this miles ahead of time,
and he had the 6 8-foot grave dug already, and the body was never seen again.
Right. There's this story in our culture of people who do this are masterminds, and they plan everything out, and they're manipulating everyone, and they know what's going to happen.
Right.
The vast majority of psychopaths are not like that. They shoot themselves in the foot all the time. They act on impulse because of their issues, and then they're like, holy crap, I just ruined my life. Like this happened.
Yeah.
You know, so many psychopaths end up in prison for this reason.
Have you guys seen the latest Ted Bundy documentary on Netflix?
Have you?
Yeah.
No, but I want to talk about it.
Well,
eventually.
let's watch it and we'll do an episode on it.
Yeah.
All I'm going to say
I'm
right
coming
this
for that
second
one.
is one of the obvious things. And we've talked about it before and stuff. So I've forgotten more about Ted Bundy than, but the point is, he sabotages himself so much, right? And so that's an example of and that I would call Ted Bundy as one of the pinnacle examples of the genius psychopath.
Right. So he was actually very smart.
Right.
And actually was very good at manipulating people. And yet he drove his life down the tubes.
Right, exactly.
You know what I mean?
You can only get away with killing people for so long before you get caught.
No,
no matter
right,
how smart
totally.
you are.
But on top of that, he would self-sabotage constantly. So like to bolster Kirk's point, even in a case where it's an adult with smarts, with experience and all these things, part of the psychopathy is actually the dysfunction.
And the beauty of the documentary, because it's focused on these interview tapes that haven't really ever been published to this extent, is he was suffering quite a bit prior to his initial killing. Right. You get the sense that even though on the outside he appeared to be put together and, attractive and, charming, on the inside, he talks about how after being broken up, his first girl, he's like, my very first girlfriend, the first person I had sex with, I was totally in love with her. When she broke up with me, I entered like, he didn't even say, and this is indicative, and I'm glad he put it this way, and we'll talk about this when we talk about it, but he talks about how he was suffering so bad that he doesn't even really remember that period of time in his life.
Right.
From the trauma.
Right. Because when to be depressed, you actually have to have a stable self. You actually have to be like, well, there's me, and now I'm depressed. When you don't have a self and you go through horrible experience,
wow.
The floor just drops out from underneath you, and you're just suffering in a vast sea, and you don't even really know how to word it. Like you're just in a horrible state. And he kind of describes that.
Weird.
And the way he came out of that was he decided he was going to get revenge.
Yeah.
And that's what gave him sort of something to hold on to.
Right.
And not, of course, every psychopath is like this, but they lay that out well. That again, it wasn't like he was 22 and going, ha 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 ha, right. I'm gonna do this. It emerged out of the deep abyss that personality disorders produce.
Well, they'll do it just to feel something. They'll kill somebody or hurt somebody just to feel something because they don't.
Right.
Yeah. And the common misconception is that that people who are psychopathic or antisocial don't feel anything for anybody, but it's not that black and white. You can fall in love and be antisocial towards certain groups of people. Right. Or everybody but your inner circle.
Right.
There's all kinds of mix and matches.
Right. And to put a fine point on that, it is that, and I'm glad you're bringing that up because that's often something that I'm talking about, is again, just because you're antisocial, just because you're a psychopath, doesn't mean you don't still have attachment needs.
Right.
In fact, you probably have deeper attachment needs because oftentimes these conditions are born out of trauma and neglect and horribleness. Yeah. Anyway, we'll definitely have to watch. It's only like 4 hours, and so I'm like half an hour through the first episode, right. I think. The other thing that I want to get into when we talk about it is that for the first, so Ted Bundy was in Seattle, and specifically
the U District.
Well, University of Washington and Issaquah, where I grew up. So there's a chance that I was at the same park as he was.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah,
dude.
While during one of his killings, yeah, and with the internet now, they have all of his locations published, and
right.
and there's all these public. In fact, one of the locations is within blocks of your house.
Oh my God.
Like one of the locations is just, I actually looked it up. And
You're going to have to show me, man.
Yeah. There's actually a few.
Crazy.
So one of the girl, well, I think maybe the first girl he killed lived like within 2 blocks of your house.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk about class warfare. Someone wants us to talk about that. Berto, what do you think?
Yeah, let's do it, man. It is the topic du jour.
So talk about it.
Well,
Let's define it.
So sure, let's define it. So you have different social, economic, maybe could be also racial classes.
Yeah. Class warfare could mean a lot of different things. Right.
And then the warfare, it's actually kind of a misnomer, right? Because it makes it sound like these are 2 warring factions going at each other and stuff. But usually it's actually a one-sided battle, you know? And so historically, because I grew up in Colombia and you know, there was a country that was part of this big empire at some point where the Spain came and took over, and essentially the class warfare was, again, it wasn't really a war, right? It was, here's how it is. Here's the Spaniards who were in the religion are the top. Then Spaniards who are not in the religion but are soldiers are next. Then are all other Spaniards. Then you get to Spaniards born in the new continent but still 100% blooded Spaniards. Then you get to Spaniards who had, I guess, babies with the locals, and so their babies are now less. And then so forth. You get all the way down to like, if you were a mix of a native and an African black, you're done. Like you were at the very, very bottom of the pile.
Was there ever, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but while you lived in Bogota as a kid, there was a coup of some kind.
Yeah, well, what we had was a lot of guerrilla warfare, right? So was
that class warfare?
Yeah, so that's how it started, right? It started in that the farmers out in the periphery of the cities, they were so dispossessed and they saw such inequities that they at first banded together with leftist ideals, and they said, you know, we got to fight for our country. We're going to fight the powers that be.
Because at the time you had similar movements in like Nicaragua,
right,
and you know, other places like that.
And it was very popular because they had read Marx and they thought, well, yeah, power to the people. We're going to turn this all into a communist ideal and so forth.
And Cuba had effectively found power and
it's kind of like a poster child.
Yeah. And so when we were driving around Bogota, you pointed to this building. It was like the Senate building or something.
Yep.
And you're like, that's where the guerrillas invaded they actually got into the Senate.
It was the Justice Palace.
Oh.
Like Justice. It was where all the justices.
I love that. How do you say it in Colombia?
El Palacio de Justicia.
The Justice Palace.
That's right. That's right.
And one of your relatives got killed, right, or something?
It was actually the other way. Well, yes, got killed, but it's because they were one of the revolutionaries.
One of your relatives was one of the revolutionaries.
Yeah, it was an indirect relative, but it was the father of one of the sort of cousins in my life.
Yeah, when I hear about this, and there's countless other examples. I mean, Venezuela is going through horrible times right now.
Right.
And I always just have to chuckle at how Americans think our country is going down the tubes.
Right.
It's like, there are things to complain about.
Sure.
But all you got to do is just kind of look around and go we're doing a lot better. Things could be so much worse. You know what I mean? Like we don't have. Imagine if communists broke into our Congress and started killing people with guns.
Sure.
That would be horrible, right? People trolling people on Twitter, doesn't compare in my.
You're absolutely right about that. The one thing I do tell people, especially there are some people that are from the boomer generation, and they have this very idyllic notion of the 50s, and mostly because they were white, so they did have a good time, in
the United States.
In the United States, and I actually try to make a case within their worldview, saying, look, actually, a lot of the things you loved, I love too, and I always looked up to the U.S. because of it. Things like amazing road systems, and you could go to places and trust the water was good, and that the local cops were on the ball, these kind of things. And granted, it is totally fantastical because in reality there were problems, but by comparison, it was pretty good. And especially if you were a white American living in middle America in the 50s and 60s, you had it pretty good, you know? Well, what I try to tell them is a lot of the things I see happening at the governmental level are very reminiscent of what the stuff I saw growing up, which is like this like little cliquey corruption of like, I'll bring in my buddy here and my family member here, and we're just gonna lie every day to everyone,
right?
And we're gonna make up facts on the fly, and we're gonna use intimidation, and we're gonna use like and that I saw it all the time growing up. So I look at it, I'm like, you run the risk of turning this into a third world thing.
Right. The importance is the faith in the system.
Right.
So when you have corruption, you lose faith in the system.
Right.
When you denigrate the whole system of checks and balances, like you just say the Supreme Court is idiots, or the House are idiots, or the justice system are idiots, or the CIA are idiots, or FBI are idiots. Right. It undermines everyone's confidence in the system, and then that starts to produce cracks, and then things can fall apart really quickly. I agree with that, and that's why, of anything that Trump does that's dangerous, it's that. Yeah. To create an entire system where people literally believe now that they can't believe anything because they think it's the Russians. Right. And so, but I want to get off
anything you see or hear.
Do you see class warfare as inevitable? From a boiling down to a sociological phenomenon? Absolutely.
Yes.
I think it's like crime. We should, not that we shouldn't continue to fight against it, but as people organize themselves into societies, from lords and serfs of medieval Europe to high school cliques, you're going to have class warfare.
Right. Again, it depends on what you mean by warfare, as we were saying earlier. But yeah, I totally agree. And I'm glad you're bringing that up, in that when you have power, it's natural to use that power, or not natural.
Human nature.
It's common, let's just say. Especially if you're afraid. If you have power, it's tempting, shall we say, to use that power to retain and grow your power.
And it comes from the human compulsion to demagogue that which is not similar to you.
Right. So there is a very frequent or universal phenomenon in any society, even in societies where you try to eliminate class, like
or micro societies like high school.
Yeah, right. Status, the popular people.
Exactly.
Versus, for sure. But there's so many things I want to get to, so I want to get off this track. A few weeks ago, we did an episode about the Gillette commercial. And we got a lot of responses.
I'm sure we did.
So we had a debate about...
oh, yeah, that was a healthy debate. Did you hear our debate?
No, dude.
You would have appreciated the debate.
I would have, and I didn't even see this. You'll have to describe it to me.
So I just want to give Humberto a chance to respond a little bit, because Humberto was taking the position that giving empathy to guys, because in the Gillette commercial, there's a scene where a guy sees a attractive woman walking by, and it looks like he's standing outside of a 7-Eleven kind of place. An attractive woman walks by, and she kind of has a sour face on her face.
Because of him?
No, she just looks like she's like in a bad mood. She doesn't look happy. She looks kind of in a bad mood, and she's pretty determinedly walking.
Yeah.
And she's attractive, and she's, curvy and has a nice dress on. And he starts to move towards her to talk to her, and he
makes a face like, oh, and then he starts moving towards her.
Hey, baby, what's going on?
He doesn't say anything.
Okay. Yeah.
He just makes a face like, ooh, and he starts walking towards her.
Okay. And then his friend says, dude, not cool. Stops him, says, dude,
not cool, not cool.
And that's the whole scene. It's probably literally like a second long.
How is that a razor commercial?
So you don't know about the commercial?
No, I haven't seen it.
So that was a lot of the same
it's just like Gillette, buy Gillette razors.
Well, so Gillette had this controversial commercial that
I heard about the controversy. Yeah, go ahead.
It's about toxic masculinity, and the whole commercial is you have to watch it. It's sort of a weird artistic rendition. You have to watch it, but one of the scenes was that, and Humberto and I focused on this one scene because I thought, we would just sort of glance on that scene and move on to other
And you felt
scenes.
it was one of the good examples.
Well, I felt like overall the Gillette commercial, again, my thesis was, if we're depending on Gillette to teach us about masculinity, we've already lost,
Right.
So, and how can we trust Gillette and the marketers thereof
right.
to know how to communicate about gender and about toxic masculinity and stuff. So it's a tall order to begin with. Also, just looking at the commercial, if I was to make a commercial about toxic masculinity, I would have made it much differently. One that was, and you devised a script that was much more tight. You know, it was just like,
focus on like one thing.
One thing that was much more understandable for, people that don't understand toxic masculinity.
Less debatable.
So what's the controversy? That he approached her?
Oh, the controversy with the ad is that the whole ad rubbed a lot of males the wrong way.
Right. So, so Humberto and I got into a debate about that scene, and I was saying like, well, I kind of get it, because if I was coming out of 7-Eleven and I saw you, Humberto, go ooh, and like you were about to...
I didn't say ooh, I just made an ooh face.
Well, you made an ooh face, and you were about to chase down this woman.
Was he chasing her?
No, he was just about. Well, he would have had to kind of trot up to her. Anyway, I would have. I said I agree with that, not because of a PC, political correct rule that you're not supposed to. I was saying, and the debate between me and Humberto really helped me to hone in on exactly my logic, which is that the probability of her being, so there's 3 main categories. She is, or maybe 4. One is that she's receptive and she's like, yay. The other is that she's neutral. She's like, not into it, but I don't really care. The other possibility is that she doesn't want you to walk up to her and she's annoyed with it. And the fourth possibility is that it's mildly traumatic for her because she's been through it so many times, and she's been literally traumatized and scared by men walking up to her on the street and having this attitude towards her. So those are the 4 possibilities. And what I was saying was the probability. So the only one that would make it worth it is if she's receptive. And my thinking was like, the probability of that happening is so low, and the probability of some negative result happening to her as a result of you walking up to her in the middle of the street in the middle of the day as she's walking to work or something is so much higher. And even if it wasn't very high, it's just not worth it. There are other places that you can hit on women rather than walking up to them as women are trying to walk to work.
And my meta point was sort of like, the probabilities of all what you said right now are so true that the probability that his feelings have been hurt repeatedly by no's are very high. So he's been re-traumatized. So therefore, the probability is that he's going to get shut down. So the guts it takes for this guy to try again. Yay! That kind of.
So a lot of people did not
see both sides of this.
A lot of people didn't like what you had to say, Berto. So I just wanted to give you a chance to respond to that.
Sure. Did they say it's specific or?
Well, I'm trying to get to that, but do you have anything to say? So here we go. Oh my God, no offense, Humberto, but do you just not get this? This is from Patricia. Women do not want this sort of attention. Nothing to do with looks. It's harassment, pure and simple. I've experienced it, and I feel it as totally disrespectful and bordering on threatening. What do you think, Berto?
Again, I mean, just to be clear, because if the implication is that he's catcalling, saying rude things, no one's disagreeing. Yeah. That's not what they showed at all. They showed him looking visually interested in her and starting to make a move to go try to talk to her. Now, will it have failed? Most likely, yes. So if that's the same category we're talking about and you still feel that way, all right, fair enough. Maybe it's a fact, and maybe it's like that's just an avenue that's just not open. You cannot approach women on the street. Maybe that's a fact. I don't know that that's true.
I have questions. Okay, are you done?
I'm done with that diatribe.
Okay, yeah. Did she respond in any way?
They didn't show the subsequent because he was stopped.
So she
by
never
his buddy.
said, "Get away from me," or "I am adverse to this advance in any way." She never gave any signal.
No, he never even got that far because his buddy stopped him.
Because I'm pretty sure for it to be harassment, wouldn't she have to reject it and then he would have to keep going?
No, the implication from these comments is that it's harassment just from the start.
So it's harassment just for a guy to approach a girl.
It sounds like it.
No, see, this is
on the street. If she's
we're getting back into the same debate, but it's probability. It's not automatic harassment. There's a chance that she'd be into it.
No, I'm saying read her.
It's a low chance.
Read her comment.
There's a well, She says women do not want this sort of attention because from her experience, most women don't.
And the last little bit. She said like borders on harassment or something?
It's totally disrespectful and bordering on threatening.
Bordering on threatening. Okay, fine. So she didn't say harassment.
Threatening if, I mean, I haven't seen this, but how is it threatening if all he did was approach her?
All he would have done is approach her on the street.
Because when you're a woman, and particularly if you're a curvy, attractive woman, you are approached, particularly if you're in a culture that this happens a lot.
For sure.
This happens so often, and in, like every fifth time or every other time is done in an actual threatening way. Because you can imagine men being really gross about this kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and they are. And
Right.
there's a bunch of clueless assholes out there that don't know how to talk to people, let alone women.
Exactly.
No doubt.
And then you approach in the exact same way, even if you have like good intentions. How does she know that is the point? And that's where the empathy comes in, where you have to actually, like there's this one example that I always say that really kind of made it click for me. Because as a guy, before I woke up, I had no idea really what women were talking about when they were talking about this. And I had a similar reaction to this. I'm like, well, what's wrong? Like, what, you can't walk up to women on the street? Like, if I was to walk up to a woman on the street, I don't have any, and if she told me to fuck off, I'd be like, okay, sorry, and no big deal. Well, this one example was this woman, Rebecca Watson. She's a famous scientist person. She was at a convention where she was actually talking. She was giving us, a talk, and she had a lot of fans. It was in Vegas, and she gets into an elevator to go to her room in Vegas and to go to bed. It's late at night, and this other guy gets in the elevator with her, not on purpose, just kind of randomly.
Yeah.
They're both going up in the elevator together. It's just the two of them, and he's a big guy. She's a short woman. And he turns to her and he says, "Oh, you're Rebecca Watson. I really like your stuff." And she's like, "Oh, thanks." And then, she doesn't really think anything of it. She's like, "Okay, that's great." And then they're going up the elevator a little bit more, and he says to her, "So would you like to come to my room? I'm having people over, and I'd love to hang out with you in my room."
Yeah.
And she's like, "No, thanks," And then she goes into her room, and then she tweets something like, "Hey, guys, if you're in an elevator with someone that you want to talk to, little advice, don't hit on her in a closed box in an elevator. It's not appreciated." Now, she just meant it as this harmless little tweet or whatever, wherever she posted it. I don't know. But it had this huge backlash. She has a lot of followers that are men, and a lot of followers who are men who are awkward around women, frankly. And so there was this huge backlash to the point where Richard Dawkins of Evolutionary, you might even, do you know Richard Dawkins?
Mm-hmm.
He's a famous person. He even came out against Rebecca Watson and said that Rebecca Watson was wrong for saying this thing. When I first saw this, I was on the side of all these men. I was just like, what? So you can't just, we don't know. Now, she was kind of implying like this was threatening, this was scary. I was scared. It sort of scared me. Right. And I'm like, well, the chance that he was a rapist is pretty low. You know what I mean? Like the chance that he was totally on the up and up and a nice guy, and he was literally just asking if he wanted to come back and hang out with his friends. He could have even been gay for all we know. We don't know.
Yeah.
And so, why are you painting him as this automatic rapist? Are you looking at me like I'm an automatic rapist? That doesn't seem fair. It seems like an overreaction or something.
Or overgeneralization.
Yeah, overgeneralization. Like a massive overgeneralization.
Yeah, like a stereotype, perhaps.
The amount of men who rape are very small. There's very little, the percentage of men who have, sexually assaulted people is small. And so, having said that, it happens a lot. But so I had a similar reaction. As the blow up happened, she started to explain her position. I slowly started to realize that many women are on this complete chasm. They're on the other side of this chasm in this whole other world than the world I live in, where I can walk down the street and just, do my life and dress the way I want to dress and smile at people and have eye contact with people and just have a regular, safe life. Women walk through the world in this constant barrage, especially if you're, again, a curvy, attractive woman.
Yeah.
But even if you're not, it's like, according to other women, it still happens. Even though only 1 out of 50 men will do something to women, if you come into contact with you come into visual contact with hundreds of men every day, then you're going to get harassed in these very gross and scary ways.
Oh, I've heard crazy stories.
Right.
Guys are just clueless.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, and some are literal rapists that are out in public, like they actually kind of get off.
Or something in between where they're just pushy enough that she feels uncomfortable and he won't take the hint. He won't get away. She's at a bar with her friend and the guy just won't she'll like ramp up how blunt about it she is until she has to actually say like, get the fuck away from me.
Right.
And even then, he won't get the clue.
Yeah. And that's scary because it's like, how far is this guy going to take this?
So, my question is, that's not what you described in that scene with the Gillette commercial.
And that's the way I used to think. And when we so let me read some more women's responses. All these women can't be delusional, right? So that's the assumption you have to go on. It's like when we listen to their experience, because they're in a whole other world, we have to assume they're not stupid or delusional. Okay, some other people. Natasha, both of us know Natasha. Everyone or different.
I know Natasha.
No, I think
she came to the live show, right?
Yeah. I've literally never had a date off of being approached in the middle of the street. Another person, actually, Lyndon chimed in and he said, "Devil's advocate. I know couples who have met this way."
So do I.
Of course, that's my point. But
right.
anyways,
I mean, nobody has ever met bumping into each other.
No.
But Patricia goes. Let me read these because I think they need to go. Patricia says, "Lyndon, I'm sure some have. I can only speak for myself when I say that it would put me off if a guy approached me like that. But different strokes for different folks." So
are these on Facebook, by the way?
See, now that is a balanced perspective.
But that's the same person who said something in the beginning. You said, "Oh my God, no offense, Humberto, but you don't get this." Emma says, "Please tell Humberto that I've been a wedding photographer for a few years now and have had seen many people." Oh, you're just talking about Tinder because you were claiming that Tinder was for weird people.
Depends on what you mean by weird.
It's a great discussion. I enjoy. So Ash says, "Great discussion. I enjoy the discourse between the two of you." Anyway, so I've said my piece, and I hope you understand what I'm saying. I don't need to get back into the debate. Feel free to comment, either one of you, on whatever you want to do about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like this. I totally acknowledge that there are blind spots to me when it comes to some of these things. Where I was trying to make my plant my flag, if you will, right, was that in a commercial where it was showing fairly obvious cases of like bullying and total, like there's this one scene where this executive is stopping a woman executive from talking and saying what she really meant to say was.
Okay, now that's another thing.
Like these obvious, like, okay, that's terrible, right? Okay. They add this scene as like, and this too, right?
Oh, I see.
And I'm sitting there going like, wow, this is so out of place. And they could have tweaked the scene just in 2 hairs and made it totally understandable. Like the gal is walking up and the guy does say something sort of smarmy or rude or gross. Absolutely. Like, okay, we're done. We're having of course, no one agrees with this. That's my main point with all of it was the lack of empathy goes both ways sometimes. So it's true, women get approached constantly and the hotter ones are so sick of it. That's true. The flip side is also true. There is a lot of class of guys that would love that kind of attention from the opposite sex or their own sex if they're gay or whatever. But I'm just going to keep it to the opposite sex. They would love to get that kind of attention from women, and they don't ever. They don't ever. And when they do try to approach a woman, they are awkward. They don't know what to say. And I'm not talking about like some like really retrograde dude who really has no social manners. I'm talking about a lot of guys, right? And they just don't know how to ask someone out on a date. And they tried approaching them on the street and they acted like they were trying to, throw insults at them. They approached them at the bar and it's like, oh no, I'm with my friends. Leave me alone. They tried to go to the mixer and it didn't work. At work, their boss talked to them about, but not like making the coworker feel uncomfortable. So like, what am I supposed to do in life? And that frustration goes without empathy as well. And now in this case, in the commercial, the dude's a good looking guy. He's going to make his approach. It probably will fail. I just didn't think it rose to that level at all. He didn't say anything rude. And clearly the guy's actually on the level because the buddy, you know, I know a lot of guys that if their buddy's like, no, cool, not cool, they're going to be like, fuck you, dude. And it's like, rush. Not this guy. He's like, oh, okay, fine. Right. So he's clearly on the bubble at worst. Right. So I just felt like that's not the right example. And if you want to say that I am not understanding how women feel, that may be true. But I just feel like I don't feel like we are being understood a little bit in that regard too. We as in the men. So there's my piece.
Yeah, could we take a broader perspective here and see how all of this could be true? That everybody has a perspective in this whole thing, and there's, God knows, I have personal friends that have been harangued by men that are just clueless or worse. Yeah. And I've been hit on by people that I didn't want to be hit on, and they were a little too aggressive in public places. I don't know. Right. Should the message be that you shouldn't approach anybody in public? I mean, but I haven't seen this commercial, so keep that in mind. But just now, you said it sounds like there were earlier scenes that sort of set a tone.
Well, and there's a little bit to the guy. Like I think they made him good looking on purpose to make him look a little sleazy maybe about it, because he makes a face like, ooh, you know, mama. He doesn't say mamacita, but you could hear him say mamacita. Yeah. Right? So I think that's part of what works into the scene.
And I think girls are identifying with guys like that and that tying it to experiences they've had where they've had some douchebag do that exact same thing and kind of filled in the blanks with their own personal experience.
So I guess to soften my message, I would say like, okay, maybe that's not great. I just wouldn't have lumped it in altogether. Like, I think we try to make everything terrible.
Yeah. Wow.
Everything's the worst.
Yeah. You have not just softened your message, you have completely retracted it according to my eyes. Okay. Which I think means... I
retract it.
Which means that you're listening to these people.
Right, but I don't retract the fact that, like, I wouldn't go so hard on this guy. He's just trying to meet someone.
Right. But your tone today is different than your tone before. You're a changed man.
I'm a changed man.
You've woke up to a little bit. That's good. You've listened to the women who have written in.
And I've had time to process.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break. When we get back, let's
Drane looks puzzled.
I am.
What are you puzzled by?
I just don't see how it's this much of a black and white issue. It seems so obvious that both perspectives are absolutely correct.
I think that's where I'm netting out.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean?
Well, they're like the people that are writing in are talking about their own personal experiences, and they're tying it to this commercial, and they're thinking about things that they've been through with, and like you said, an attractive woman. If only 1 in every 50 guys is a rapist or a douchebag or something in between, and they get hit on by 50 guys a day, that means once a day they're going to have one of these guys, right? Sure. They have some experiences, and at the same time, is the message that nobody should approach anybody in public at all? Like, how the hell are you ever supposed to meet anybody? And if you look at pop culture and movies, that's not the message that's being conveyed.
I agree with that.
People can, I mean,
I agree with the fact that in the media, they don't portray the reality of women being harassed on the street as often as they are.
And I think we should be careful about terms like harassment, because I think harassment implies that he was rejected and then persisted anyway.
But again, there's no clear words to describe what they were trying to depict. Yeah, like we're
it's open to interpretation.
The three of us are inserting the word harassment. The Gillette commercial never says.
No. That was used in the comment.
But that's this person. But
no, she did. She said, I
don't remember.
Threatening. And yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there's levels to this, and certainly someone going up to someone and saying, hey, can I talk? Oh, I can't. Okay, fine. Might have been annoying. I don't think that's harassment. Some people might think it is. I don't think it is. But someone going like, yo, baby, come give me the digits. What's wrong with you? Yeah. Oh, you bitch.
Chat call. Now we're in something else.
Fucking harassment.
Wait, and hitting on a girl that's trying to walk to her car outside of a 7-Eleven is obviously a very stupid place to try to hit on a girl. I think we can all agree with that.
It wasn't a 7-Eleven. It was like a Starbucks.
I just don't know if it rises to the level. I don't know. I haven't seen this, and it sounds like because it's so open to interpretation that people are filling in their own experiences.
Right. Emily, patron Emily, whom we all know as well.
Oh yeah.
Basically said that, which is that the commercial is a Rorschach test for
Brilliant.
whoever you are.
Well done, Emily. She's a therapist, by the way.
Let's take a break, and when we get back, let's continue answering some of your questions. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we are back from the break. If you haven't become a patron of Michael Drane's podcast on popular culture, do so now. Go to patreon.com/UPC
podcast.
UPC podcast. Become a patron of our podcast. Also, if you're having trouble with the premium feed, email us at contact@psychologyinseattle.com. Also, like our Facebook page and play our Tuesday Tougher Bluff game. We had a recent Tougher Bluff in which I basically bluffed everyone who played the game, and there was because the Tougher Bluff was Facebook use is associated with higher self-esteem, and everyone was like, "Oh, bluff! That's there's no way that's true, right? Facebook and self-esteem, there's no way." But actually, research shows. I mean, the research is really mixed, kind of, but there's plenty of studies actually pointing to. Now, does Facebook cause self-esteem to be high? No, it's just a correlation. It seems that people with higher self-esteem tend to use Facebook more often.
It's probably dependent on how many friends they have on Facebook. How popular are you on Facebook, tying directly into your self-esteem?
So they looked into stuff like that, and they find that the way people use Facebook depends on how helpful it is. But there's this dominant, apparently very dominant understanding in our culture right now that Facebook and social media erodes your well-being. There's like this notion like there's nothing good about Facebook. There's nothing good about Twitter. There's nothing good about anything on the internet. And it's like, that can't be true.
I have a theory on this based on mirror neurons.
On mirror neurons?
Mirror neurons.
Oh, mirror neurons.
Kirk loves when I talk about mirror neurons.
Well, there's just a lot of pseudoscience about mirror neurons.
It's because we don't understand it very well yet.
Yeah, right. You know? I mean, there's legit science about it for sure.
Well, if you can assume that they were wired and evolved to bond by actual physical, like I'm looking right now at both of you, I'm in the room with both of you, and my brain is wired to do that because that's how we were evolved, right?
Yeah.
Well, social media takes all of that out the window. And so is it the same nourishment, the same social nourishment, because you're not getting those mirror neurons fed?
Visually, you're saying.
I've heard that argument.
And just like in a proximity kind of way. I think just being in a room, like a quality time sort of perspective.
I've heard those arguments, right? Like it's time immemorial. The advent of computers, the advent of the internet, the advent of Facebook, it's killing our ability to socialize. And the fact is that I am able to socialize with my relatives and my family in the complete opposite side of the world at almost all times now where I never before was able to. So I'm able to keep those relationships way more alive. To give you an example, leading up to my birthday last week, in years past, I would probably do a call with my dad and maybe my grandma. Sometimes my aunt would call me. So maybe like 3 calls. And then on Facebook, you know, all these people post like, happy birthday, happy birthday. Well, but then, you know what I also did? I created a WhatsApp group with my relatives from Colombia. And it was great because like that day, they weren't just like, hey, happy birthday, bro. No, it was like these beautiful messages and like you've meant so much in our family, little audio messages they sent me, some jokes and things like that. And it went on for hours and we went back and forth. Like I haven't had an interaction like that with my family on my birthday for 35 years or something like that.
Right. So that's a good point that I think is often ignored by the common discourse. The other thing is that that's a solution to industrialization and to the diffraction of families. If we went further back in history, all those people would be within earshot of you on your birthday.
Most of them dead, but sure.
Which goes to the other point that socialization itself is an evolving thing, just like language and society itself. You know, it's always
absolutely.
changing.
There's truth on both sides. Absolutely. I just think it's so easy to cast this net.
Totally.
Of like,
and I find old and young people like share this value.
Sure.
Like even though young people are more likely to use social media, I find a lot of young people will denigrate social media because they'll just be like, oh, Facebook, oh, Instagram is so dumb. And it's like, you must be using it for some reason. Having said that, like I said before, there's different ways you can use Facebook. So I've been using Facebook for 12 years now or something.
Right.
And I've used it in various different ways. I've landed on a certain way of using it, and I've been mostly like this throughout the years, in that I don't do it to talk about politics. I don't do it to get likes. Like, I don't really care if I get it. I went through a period where I actually went through a period like that, where it's like, ooh, I got this many likes. Like, what else could I post that will get likes?
Right.
Well, that's the source of what people are complaining about.
Right. But I don't use Facebook like that anymore. I know, for example, my mother doesn't use Facebook like that and probably never has.
Right.
And I use Facebook as a way, as you're saying, Berto, to connect with other people in ways that I wouldn't be able to. Like on your birthday, for example, we weren't going to see each other, but on my Facebook actually told me, that
4 years ago.
4 years ago,
yeah,
I posted a mashup video of
which
you.
is an amazing mashup video.
I liked it.
Oh, you saw it?
I physically liked it on Facebook, and I emotionally enjoyed it. So
Right.
I meant that in a duplicitous way.
So 4 years ago, I took all the video clips that I'd ever videoed of Berto and made like a 3-minute
epic mashup. Yeah.
And there's all these like
totes adorbs.
Funny,
And what's great is I actually had forgotten, not like forgotten about the action, but I like forgot there was this video.
I forgot about the video too.
And then you posted it, I'm like, oh, right. And then I watched it again, and it was like fun again, like. And by the way, so I had left Facebook for almost 3 months, actually. It was like 2.5 months out of protest for their involvement with not doing proper. Not taking proper steps to limit the negative influences of Russian hacking and things like that.
For sure.
So I took a break. And I was actually debating not coming back because honestly, part of me didn't miss it. One thing is my mom actually started telling me how much she missed me posting pictures and updates. And so I thought, oh yeah, there's that little contingent.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if people aren't into it, they're not into it. But there's a way to use it that I think we're still all trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Like again, and I never really thought about it just now that I went through a phase where I was trying to get fulfillment through likes on Facebook,
right,
and found that eventually I sort of burnt out on it. Eventually, I was just like, well, it's kind of meaningless.
Right.
Like people just like things sort of reflexively, like, well, that looks like something I'm supposed to like.
A cat.
Yeah. And it's not super meaningful. Do you know what I mean? It's not like it doesn't mean as much as I kind of thought it
Absolutely.
meant.
There's all kinds of dynamics. Like people will like something based on how many likes it already has.
Oh,
like
totally.
a cumulative bandwagon kind of phenomenon.
So I remember at a certain point I was like, okay, I'm going to use Facebook for things that I actually value, which is connection with other people.
Yeah, and you start posting a lot of your history, like your family history.
Yeah,
Right.
your videos.
And I'm not so concerned about, because I'm friends with hundreds of people on Facebook, I'm not so concerned with all those people even looking at those posts.
Right.
What I'm mainly posting it for is for my family.
That's right.
Facebook is the main place, and extended family. I'm talking like I have third cousins I'm friends, because I've done all this genealogy. Where else am I going to post something about family history and they're all going to see it?
Right.
Like I would have to individually email all of them or something. And that's just not convenient. Whereas Facebook, I can instantly tag them all.
Totally.
We do have another use though, especially the three of us. The Facebook and social media is promotional for our podcasts.
Yeah. And for, my band.
So I'll tell you, the negative is I had started to use it as this rat hole of debates because of the political climate.
Right, you would get into debates with
constantly, and they were long rat holes, dark. And then I started slowly realizing how unhappy it was making me, and also how useless they were.
Right.
Because I wasn't convincing them.
No, they're not.
They certainly weren't convincing me.
Right.
So it was like, you know what? What am I doing? And that part of me,
the best way to articulate yourself in 160 character tweets.
But even if you were talking to them, I'm sure it wouldn't go.
So part of me actually leaving was protest, but also sort of like therapy. And since I've been back, I have no desire to get in any of that stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It was sort of like a cold turkey plunge.
Of course, it gets kind of scary and depressing because then the message seems to be we shouldn't have conversations with people we disagree with, and that sucks.
True.
And
where are we supposed to have the conversations?
Right. Is this not the best possible platform? It feels like it should be.
I don't think so, honestly.
In theory, it feels like it would be. If you didn't know, if you went back to the 90s and explained Facebook,
right.
they'd be like, oh my God, that sounds great.
Right. Yeah. A place where you could learn about,
other perspectives and come together and all this stuff of what it's supposed to be on paper. Yeah. And the reality is just not that.
Right. So like our Facebook page, and you can participate in our Tuesday Tougher Bluff game, which can sometimes be quite lively, as we're exhibiting right now. Along those lines, I have a band called New York City Cops where we play different covers. We're currently doing The Strokes and Radiohead. We're I think we're going into the Beatles next. And if you go to New York City Cops on Facebook, you can find out about our shows around Seattle.
I'm going to your show tomorrow night to heckle you.
I'm going too.
I can't wait.
Yeah.
Tweet Berto at Psych0Berto. Also,
Psychoberto.
Find Psychoberto on YouTube. He's posting on YouTube, Psychoberto.
So psycho.
Also, if you're looking for archived episodes, go to our website. That's the best place to find older episodes. If you're listening to this on your phone or on Patreon, in all likelihood, you don't even have access to the majority of episodes that we've made, because we've made 850 episodes or something. We have another Patreon goal on Patreon. We're trying to get up to, I think, 1,100 patrons, if I'm not mistaken. And at that level, we will offer another scholarship for $2,500. So go there, and you can be part of the magic to actually support needy students in mental health. So there's that. Okay, I just wanted to. Sometimes people ask me to talk about movies, and I don't want to go into it too much. So I'm just going to breeze right through movies I've seen recently, and you can chime in if you have anything to say.
Got it.
Today or yesterday, I rewatched Deadpool 2.
Oh, I've never seen that.
I saw that with you, Kirk. That was hilarious.
So,
man, that's the best movie.
Yeah, I loved Deadpool 1, and Deadpool 2 I thought would be great, and it was.
Yeah.
And I gave it a 9 out of 10 when I watched it the first time. And then I rewatched it again and gave it a 9 out of 10. I rewatched it again, and I bumped it up to a 10.
Really?
Whoa.
I gotta watch this.
What changed?
I watched the version with Fred Savage. Have you seen the version with Fred Savage?
No.
There's this other version where they include, it's like Princess Bride, where Fred Savage is in bed and the grandfather's reading, and so Deadpool is reading to Fred Savage, and he has Fred Savage duct taped to the bed, and he recreated the bedroom scene from.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
And so every once in a while, as in Princess Bride, they come out of the movie and they come to that bedroom scene. And so maybe it was that, I don't know, but I think what it is I've seen a lot of movies. I always see a lot of movies, and I haven't really seen anything that's really been like really good. And upon watching Deadpool 2, I was just like, this is a great story. It's understandable. It's not like this sweeping Avengers plot that, spins out of control. It's hilarious from beginning to end.
I feel so left out.
It's well casted too.
Did you see Deadpool 1?
Of course.
Well, it's just
all
as good.
The same treats work in the second one. Yeah.
I guess what happened was, for some reason, I assumed that the second one wouldn't be as good.
No, it is. It's good.
It's in some ways it's
okay. I'm
better.
Watching it.
You know how
tonight,
how George Clooney was an amazing Batman.
Yeah.
That's how Ryan. No, right? Like sometimes the actor is not well cast to play the superhero.
Yeah.
But Ryan
was born for this.
Perfect.
Yeah. Totally.
For Deadpool 2.
Yesterday I saw The Favorite, which is a movie that is up for a lot of Oscars.
Oh.
And it's a period piece. Did anyone of you see The Lobster, the movie with Colin Farrell?
No, but I know what you mean.
Same director, but
so The Favorite is like about the two queens or two
Queen Anne. No, you're thinking of it's about Queen Anne in the early 1700s.
Yeah,
and it's historical fiction. So they're taking the history of it and expanding greatly and speculating greatly on the story.
Isn't like there's two women, one of them's jealous of the other.
Yeah, the previews make it look like a comedy. It's kind of funny, but it's actually pretty dark.
Okay.
A lot of, and the story goes in some very interesting ways. but the dialogue is great. The drama is great. It's basically about three women.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about a queen and like two people who are trying to vie for her attention. Essentially.
Right.
And the costumes
cool.
are fantastic, and the setting is fantastic because they actually shoot the movie in an actual palace in England that used to where they used to live.
Man, I hate it when you go off on movies, Kirk, that I haven't seen. You can't do that in the podcast, man.
Well, we're having a Oscar party that both of you are coming to,
so I better watch it.
You got to start because this is one is up for a lot of us.
I will be wearing my high school prom tuxedo. Just so
you still have it.
Yeah.
Dude.
First Reformed is another that's up for screenplay. Ethan Hawke. It's the same. The writer-director wrote
Ethan Hawke.
Taxi Driver and Last Temptation of Christ.
Oh, wow.
And other movies like
What's
that.
it called again?
First Reformed.
First Reformed.
It's about a priest or a minister, modern day, who he is struggling with health, and he becomes, shall I say, like extremist in some ways that kind of makes sense. Anyway, I gave it 7 out of 10. There's some weird scenes in it that I didn't like, but I thought it was good. Leave No Trace, a movie that actually a listener said, you got to see it. It's about PTSD. A guy comes back from the war, and him and his daughter, the mother I think had died or something, and in order to get away from being triggered, he takes his daughter into the woods around Portland, Oregon, and lives in the woods. But they're happy. They survive. Everything's great. But social services totally disagrees with it, right? Because the girl has to go to school, and it's considered. So there's this weird, and they play it very realistic. Like the social workers, the social workers aren't evil,
right?
They're just
really burned out and underpaid.
Well, these social workers don't seem very burned out. They seem like they're happy to do their jobs.
So it's not very realistic.
Right, exactly.
The Sisters Brothers with John C. Reilly and Joaquin Phoenix. Have you seen this movie?
No.
Pretty good. 8 out of 10. I really liked it. It's
many movies I haven't even heard of.
It's a Western.
I'm such a loser.
I rewatched Die Hard.
Oh, yeah.
Die Hard.
Yippee-ki-yay, mother...
And I thought, you can swear on this podcast.
I know. I thought it was, sometimes the absence of a cuss word is even more powerful.
The space made itself felt.
Yeah.
I hadn't watched Die Hard all the way through in a long time.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, I'm sure it's okay. It's a solid movie.
I love Die Hard.
Sure.
The ending is ridiculous, but there up until a certain point, it was like it's
a thrilling movie.
Yeah, it moves
so
fast.
Funny. It's
and didn't they recently rip off Die Hard in was it not Vin Diesel? Dwayne The Rock Johnson just ripped this Die Hard premise off. It's called The Tower. I think.
Really?
I didn't see it.
No, I didn't need to see it because I've seen Die Hard. So it's fine.
The Death of Stalin. Anyone see that movie? It came out last year.
No.
I gave it 7 out of 10. It's pretty good. It's, again, historical fiction about the week around when Stalin died.
Okay.
And it's definitely a comedy, but the way that they tell the story, I looked up the accuracy of the story, is actually fairly accurate. So if you want to kind of get it's sort of like Veep. Have you ever seen the TV show Veep?
Yeah.
It's like that, but because Veep can kind of be realistic at times about American politics. So it's like that, but in 1953 or whatever in USSR when Stalin died. It's pretty good.
Huh. And there was no uproar about it or anything?
What do you mean?
Like, maybe I'm mistaking it, but like if they were
all
sort
Russian
of like taking
soldiers.
it too light considering the massacres and
I thought about that because they make fun of all those people, and you would think the Russians would be like, hey, because if the Russians made a comedic story about the death of like Abraham Lincoln or something, it'd be like, what are you doing? Like you're the other kind of cool thing about it is none of them are speaking in fake Russian accents. Like they're all just speaking in their regular accents. Like there's like Steve Buscemi's in it and he's just talking in his regular voice.
Interesting.
Anyway, Beautiful Boy with Steve Carell and Timothy Chalamet. I think it's also
I heard that's great.
I didn't like it.
Really?
It's about a boy who has meth addiction or just various addictions, and the father is trying to save his life, essentially. And the kid's in and out of rehab and all this kind of stuff.
That sounds brutal.
And it is pretty brutal. And I thought it depicted it fairly well, but the dialogue and the writing and the directing of the actors is so bad. I mean, Steve Carell.
Really?
I think Steve Carell has sort of reached his limit in my mind. I love The Office.
We're at peak Carell.
I loved him in 40-Year-Old Virgin. And I feel like he's getting cast in movies that he should not be in.
He does dramatic roles pretty well, though.
So
I mean, he's capable of it.
Like the Way Back, I think it was.
Yeah,
when he's that evil stepdad. He's really good in that. But in Beautiful Boy, even Timothy Chalamet, who is a wonderful actor, the dialogue, the way it seemed to me, and this is just me speculating, of course, was that the director, who I believe is not American, he's not an American. He doesn't speak English.
I see.
It's not his primary language. So I think what happened was he told the actors to go through this scene, and I think he took like the first take. Like you can imagine like the first take being kind of clunky, where you can tell the gears are turning in the actors' minds. You know what I mean?
Right,
How you can tell when certain actors, they're not really comfortable with the lines yet.
Right.
Every scene kind of felt that way to me.
Interesting.
And especially Steve Carell. I mean, he just seemed like he was really struggling with the acting, and I just never was convinced that Steve Carell was that character. Having said that, there's some wonderful scenes, and the movie was like way too long. I mean, this movie has no plot. It's not one of those things. It's not like it's just a trudgery through this difficult time in this family's life. And I think it was like 2 hours long or something. And it's like, you could have, why? What does it need to be long? Anyway, I give it 5 out of 10. It's if you want to watch a movie like that, it's not bad. Okay. Patron Claire writes in, she says, I was wondering if you would be willing to offer your insight on the anti-vaxxer movement. Burrow, what do you think?
So, anti-vaxxing. Years ago, actually, maybe a decade ago, I started looking into this because, honestly, I am absolutely skeptical of pharmaceutical companies. Any time where you set up a system where the incentive is, how much can we charge a governmental structure to put our product out into the ecosystem, you're going to get corruption. And that is what we have, right? So we have a system where essentially, and doctors, private and government, where it's like, what drugs can we pump out there? Because that's how we make money. We got to make money out of these drugs. So that's why you have all these commercials with all these various drugs you can tell your doctor about and all these things. So I'm very skeptical about it. And I started hearing these little rumors, and Jenny McCarthy and Jim Carrey were like, pretty sure our son's autistic because we gave him a vaccine. And I'm like, what's happening? And I'm like, yeah, actually there are a lot of autistic cases lately. Maybe there's something to this, And I remember doing a deep dive. Like, I watched everything I could and read everything I could within, a weekend, like I spent hours and hours and hours deep diving on this. And it didn't take that long to start finding like, oh, okay. I think a lot of them are basing this stuff on some study that some doctor did that was like, some potential correlation between autism and mercury in vaccines. A study which was then like basically refuted, and then he was what do you call a doctor that gets disbarred? Not a
unemployed.
The equivalent of disbarred for lawyers, but for doctors, right? Like, the boards refuted his stuff or whatever. And anyways, I started looking into it, and then I also knew, okay, well, there are a lot of vaccines that come from China, and actually, I'm sure the quality standards are low, right? But you can actually get vaccines that are made here in America, and then they don't contain a lot of extra pollutants and stuff. But once the damage was done, it was done. And so a lot of folks started going down that rabbit hole and not, I guess, not going deep enough to be like, oh, wait a minute. If you do a little more research, you see that no, vaccines absolutely help. They've been helping for a long time. You can work with your doctor to not give 10 vaccines the same day to your child, but it doesn't mean that they're going to die from autism with the mercury and all this stuff.
Good. And to be clear, there's been a lot of research, because wouldn't it be interesting if we were actually contributing to the rise of autism through vaccines. So,
Right.
So obviously medical professionals are very interested in that.
Right.
And they've
mystery that they've had. Like, why is there autism?
Yeah,
Well,
and they've done tons of studies on this and found that there's absolutely no correlation between vaccines and autism.
Yeah, I worked in an ER, and I had an ER doc explain this to me in detail about how the vaccine is not harmful. And I'm not a medical guy, so I don't know. But there are other explanations for the rise of autism, like our understanding of it has increased, and before it was diagnosed as something else, and it actually might have always been existed, but it was passed off as something like maybe schizophrenia, for example, or mental retardation, or developmental delay, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the autism spectrum disorder, by definition, includes a lot more individuals.
Exactly.
And the awareness of it, and you say the diagnosis of it, so it looks like autism is on the rise, but when you look at the data, it seems as though we're just detecting more of it, or we're just labeling it more often.
And just like everything else, it's a spectrum, and higher on the spectrum, people who are high functioning autistic pass on in the world without, people think they're socially awkward or something, but otherwise, definitely wouldn't have been seen. I think 20 years ago, it wouldn't have been recognized at all.
Right. Well, part of it is also like we live, like my generation and the younger generations, they never had to live with polio.
Yeah, or tuberculosis,
or measles,
or measles. So it's like, I don't know. I don't see a problem. Like, what's the problem, right? Whereas the boomers were like, excuse me, I had polio. And I actually, when I was growing up in Colombia, polio was still a problem. I didn't, like, when I moved up here, I was like, oh, polio's been eradicated here, and I think it was eradicated globally in the 90s, right? I believe that's right. But that was a problem, and it's like, we don't realize how vulnerable we are already with things we can't even vaccinate against. And here we are making it worse with problems we had already solved.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so tragic.
Right. So I think as measles, because there's something like over 30 cases in Washington State, in Clark County, which is down by Portland actually. And that... I think what will happen is the pendulum will swing, and any parent who was on the fence or who was in the anti-vax arena will be like, so there are kids getting measles and going to the hospital?
Right.
Like, so wait, what was I doing? Right. And I think, to your point, a lot of the things that we've been vaccinating have been completely out of people's awareness.
Right.
And it's like, yeah, what's the problem? Like,
I don't see a problem.
Why do I need to vaccinate my kid? Like, measles doesn't exist. And it's like, yes, it does.
Yeah. CDC
that's why,
has a sample of it in Atlanta.
That's why you have the vaccine.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I find that it's interesting. I actually talked about this in a different podcast that you guys weren't on, because I don't have you guys on every podcast, by the way. But the only thing I think I can add to what we've already said is that for some reason, there's a certain group of people who are extremely skeptical of scientific consensus, but only among select things that no one questions airplanes flying, for example.
Right, or they will be tweeting their scientific skepticism on their phone,
right?
Not realizing all the steps, that little electronic message. How did me pressing on a thing cause little characters, and then those characters got bundled up and sent into the air,
right?
And somehow I tell the world that I'm skeptical of science,
right? And so to be clear, there are scientists who, through the scientific method, incrementally discovered things and are currently still making claims about electricity and radio waves and transmission and reception and zeros and ones, and no one questions that. You're just like, well, yeah, of course,
Of course.
Computer people, they understand. Cell phone people, but for some reason, vaccination people have no idea what they're talking about. Or, evolution, those scientists, they have no idea what they're talking about. Or psychiatry, they have no idea what they're talking about. Or GMO, people who say GMOs are fine, they have no idea what they're talking about. They select these slivers of science,
totally,
where they're just, or global warming. It's like, all those idiots, all of them are idiots, but every other scientist completely fine.
Yeah, the ones I do depend on day to day, I guess. Part of it too. No, I can empathize with this. Say you're a young person about to have a child, And you look around, and this world looks dangerous for little children. You know, there's so many. And you go online, and you're looking for better care, and then you see this little article: "Don't vaccinate your child. You'll kill him. You'll give him autism."
Well, and it's posted on Facebook.
In fact, your friend Ron had posted a really funny comic about it. It's saying it was like a person that was like riddled with measles, and it was like, well, at least I don't have autism. It's like, fuck you, Karen. You know, like which would you rather have? Would you rather be autistic or would you rather be dead from measles?
Exactly. So that's but you know, I can empathize to that parent. Or
right.
That potential parent.
So, and even more viscerally, your 6-month-old child who is totally vulnerable, and you have a deep, you know, visceral human soul-to-soul connection with.
Right.
And when that child is uncomfortable, your head hurts, your heart hurts.
Yeah.
Right.
When that child is sick, you can't do anything but just stand over it and go like, "Oh my God, what do I do? Like, the kid is sick." And then you take the child and you hand the baby over to a physician who starts stabbing the baby with needles and starts injecting God knows what into that child. That is
Scary.
Yeah, it's scary.
Terrifying.
And unless you have like a robust understanding of why the society is recommending this, then you're going to be like, well, you know, and then you get the article and you get Jenny McCarthy.
Right.
Then you're like, well, I'll err on the side of not doing that. You know what I mean?
Because you don't see the consequences.
No.
Any good conspiracy theory is based somewhat in truth. And so, like you said, Berto, big pharma, rich, greedy, pushing drugs on people all the time totally happens, and it becomes a basis for this art.
Right.
Like opiates, for example.
Exactly.
Like a classic that there, we actually do have I wouldn't call it a conspiracy theory. I would just call it a massive marketing push that companies will do.
Right.
And physicians were not pushing back when they should have been.
How do you feel about the topic of, because they're playing with laws about mandatory vaccinations? How do you feel about that? Because I am pro-vaccination, but I don't like the idea of I have to have one.
It depends on the condition. With measles, I wonder, because if it was like smallpox or something, or you know, something that killed people, I don't know. I mean, because other countries, they'll do this. You know, other countries, the society just is such where they don't value individual freedom the way that, you know, the Americans do. And, you know, their people are fine. Do you know what I mean? It's not like everything's horrible over there.
It just feels like once you justify like a mandatory shot in the arm, then where does it end? It just feels scary.
Yeah. As a person who has a libertarian streak in me, it very much bothers me.
For sure.
What I would hope is that what we did in the past, because it wasn't like parents in the 60s and 70s and 80s didn't care about their babies. It was that they understood there's a reason for this, and it's a wonderful thing that we have vaccines. There are other countries where they don't have these vaccines, and their kids are dying as a result or are becoming disabled. Thank God we have scientists to solve our problems. In the same way that today, when you pick up a cell phone, you remember a time when the cell phone didn't exist. So you can say, thank you, Samsung, for inventing this cell phone. There will come a day when it's just, you know, people will just be like, well, didn't cell phones always exist?
It's already starting to happen. There's a new movie. I don't know the movie, but an actress is a teenager and she plays the character in the 80s. And the actress didn't know how to work the Walkman. It had to be explained what the cassette tape was, how to actually utilize that. Right. So that's already starting to happen, man.
In real life, you mean?
In real life, the actress was like, what do I do with this? To even know what the hell that was.
What do you mean, what do I do? It's a Walkman. What's
you got
a Walkman?
Gen Zers that don't understand life without a cell phone, or even like that sense of privacy that came with it.
So, the only other thing I'll say about this is that there's a lot of propaganda, which is hard for people to interpret, which we basically have been saying. Also, scientists need to communicate better with the public. The fact that Jenny McCarthy, she's just one human being, managed to completely eclipse the entire scientific community with her ranting and ravings.
Right.
It's
the fact that she can do that means that the scientific community is not doing their job at communicating to the public. The scientific community and the medicine community in general, of course, there are exceptions to this, but as a whole, they're more reactive, right? They're more like, okay, someone's sick, let's fix them. They're not thinking, or the government or whoever is not spending enough money and energy on like, how do we head this off at the pass? I mean, Jenny McCarthy has been talking about this for 12 years or something.
Right. And she's not stopped, right?
It's been a long time.
Yeah.
The fact that we don't have, what we should be able to say to ourselves is, well, we know so-and-so, and we know so-and-so, and we know so-and-so. They are experts whom we'd love to go to who talk about such things. And they say that vaccines are fine. And they've laid it all out in this YouTube video. We don't have anyone like that.
That might be giving people too much credit, though. I mean, I think about the phenomenon of celebrity. I think a lot of the reason Jenny McCarthy is getting as much traction is because she's Jenny McCarthy.
So
versus a scientist that stands up on a podium, stuffy, no gravitas, no glamour.
I'm not saying necessarily a scientist. There are plenty of pro-vaccination celebrities whom you could hire, for example, or train or something.
So who hires them, though?
The government allocates money to spend on public health, to educate the public, to save people's lives.
You know, I agree with you. And I also see the problem of, oh, there we go. There's the government trying to use celebrities for indoctrinating us
You're
further.
always going to have somebody bitching about no matter what you do. You're going to have somebody.
Well, especially, I mean, there is this whole thing about like the Hollywood elites.
Yeah.
And they're embedded with the government.
Well, you find a gruff guy from, mid Texas to talk about it. That's not like
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely.
It doesn't have to be Brad Pitt. And so my point is like we have no one like that. Yet we all know Jenny McCarthy.
Right.
We all know her talking about this sort of thing. We have no figurehead of public health when it comes to this sort of thing, and that's a problem of our society. That's a problem of our allocation of money. It wouldn't have cost much money to combat Jenny McCarthy. You probably could have done it literally for like $50,000.
People associate celebrity with authority. And so if you're famous, you must know something. You must have some kind of special power and some kind of special insight and knowledge. And that's a fundamental like influential psychology thing that's happening.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as we can see.
And how do you fight that, with another celebrity is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. Or you make a scientist like Bill Nye or something into a famous person.
But Neil deGrasse Tyson will get on and say that no, the Earth is not flat, and flat earthers will rebut him and call him a liar.
Right.
So even the expert opinion and a charming celebrity-esque scientist like Neil deGrasse Tyson still gets swatted down. Absolutely.
But if we do nothing, then it gets so bad that you have actual measles cases, so
we clearly have to do more.
Yeah.
No question.
There's always going to be people on the fringes, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Anyway, so that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle, in which we answered random questions from you. If you have, we always love short questions because it's easier to prepare for. It provokes us to talk about random things. So if you have short questions, email it to us at contacts@psychologyinseattle.com or comment on this video or whatever, and we'll maybe address that. Thanks for joining us out there. Please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.
Yeah, you do.